Ladies and gents, I would now like to give you a practical exercise, and this is going to be designed around the ethos perspective. You remember I said that the ethos had to do with the worldview, the mental models, the values. The ethos is the DNA. It is your identity. It's who you are. It is extremely important. Something that really bothers me is that a lot of organizations today in the commercial world adopt a value system and they put it on paper and put it against the walls and they put it in their annual statements. And that's where it ends. It is something which you need to constantly work with every single day. If you don't know who you are, all those other dimensions that I spoke of, all those other perspectives that I spoke of, really become irrelevant. You'll be doing that as an activity without any real meaning. I've already explained to you, ethos will impact what you see in the environment. It will impact, given what you see in the environment, it will impact the kind of strategies and the vision that you will adopt. So we need to really understand, what is our ethos? What is our value system? What are our values? A chap with the name of Richard Barrett, he distinguished between an internal dimension and an external dimension. But that was relevant for both the individual and the group. And when he worked with the internal side of the individual, he said that had to do with the values of the individual. We need to understand what they are. But then he said you also need to look at the internal side of the organization within which that individual functions. That individual in your case, either being the teacher or the child. And in a certain sense, I think you cannot take the parent out of the equation as well. So the individual dimension and the internal dimension of the individual, the culture side, needs to be aligned with the internal side of the organization. And that is where we find the culture manifesting itself. And there needs to be a strong alignment between the values of the individual and the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization should encompass the values of the individual. Your teachers, you need to develop and you need to recruit teachers that live the values of the organization. That is the internal side of the individual and the system, or the individual and the group. The external side of the individual has to do with behavior. With other words, the individual has an internal side, the value, and an external side, the behavior. These need to be aligned as well. If there are certain behaviors that are expected of the individual, then the individual either has to have the values associated with him, or you need to inculcate within him or her the values that would allow him to exhibit those behaviors without an incongruency. And on the organizational level, again, on the external side, you need the behavior of the group and the value system of the group to be aligned with one another. And this makes the whole idea of an ethos something complex. In principle, quite simple, however. And what I would like us to do today is, once we've finished with this DVD, to go and say, but what are our current values? And what are the behaviors that we associate with each one of those? Not what should they be, what are they? It might not be something that we like, and yet we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to go and say, but what are these values and what are the behaviors we associate with them? And if we don't like what we see, ladies and gents, we need to then go and say, but what are the values that we want? What are the desired values? And then, very importantly, what are the behaviors associated with each one of these values? And also, what are the behaviors that are not associated with the values that we would like? What I want you to do is to do that exercise. A, what are our current values and what are the behaviors? And B, what are our desired values and what are the behaviors associated with each one of those values and the behaviors that we do not want to see given that specific value. Now, how do we do this? First of all, typically what one would like to do is to get the executive and the teachers together, that they go and say, but we as the leadership of this school, this is what we think the values should be. This is what we think the behaviors should be, and this is what we think that what behaviors we do not want to see given our value set. And this is not something that's going to happen in an afternoon. It is something that you need to deliberate upon, identify them, think about them. And once we're comfortable with that, then you need to share that with the governing body of the school. Is that how they see the school? And it's not something that you go to them and say, this is what we as the teachers of the school think, and make peace with it. It is something that you need to go to them and say, this is what we have identified as a working document. Look at it, give your opinion, formulate your views. And what you then do, ladies and gents, is you get consensus between the governing body and the school that these are indeed the values and the behaviors that we want for the school. And once you have done that, the next step would be, the third step with other words, would then be to go to the parents and tell the parents this is how we as the teachers and the governing body of the school see the value system and the behaviors of the school associated with each one of the values. And get the teachers on board. I lied, to get the parents on board. And once you have done that, ladies and gents, then you go to the scholars, your most important stakeholder body, and get them aligned with the values. Because ideally, what you are working at and what you're looking at is a scenario where the different stakeholders in the school live the values, and that the values become the boss of that school, and that every behavior, be it from the executive, be it from the teachers, be it from the scholars, are measured against the values.